And this one is a competitive civilization game that plays over 3 different ages. And this one is also my own personal pick of the week because I think this one looks like a fantastic design. And it also reminds me of one of my favorite games of all time, which is Nations, which if you haven't played this game, it's such a classic and I definitely recommend it. That being said, these games are very different from each other and will give you a very different overall experience. I just do think there is a fair bit of overlap with certain mechanisms and there will be a similar feel with certain aspects of the game. And obviously they do share a similar theme. But in this game, players are going to be each playing as their own asymmetrical nation with their own special actions, and each player is also going to be starting with a hand of invention cards that they're going to be using throughout the game. Players are going to be using their actions to explore the world, expand their influence, build different settlements and wonders, create inventions, and build and deploy their military units. The main map's actually made up of a bunch of different modular tiles that are face down at the beginning of the game, but then on your turn you're going to be gaining an invention card from the next era, which means that it's going to be a little bit more powerful, and I'll come back to how those work in a second here. But then on your turn you'll also be able to choose one map tile to flip face up, and then you'll also have to pay for any military units that you currently have as part of your nation. After that you can do one of two things. You can either build an invention and then perform one action of your choice, or instead you can perform 2 actions of your choice. And one thing to note with building inventions is that you do have to meet the requirements in order to build it, but then it's going to be granting you some special ability for the rest of the game, and each invention does generate a resource when it's built, and it's going to be granting both you and the player to your left that resource. Another thing to note about the inventions is that you do have to build 3 within each round, and there's only 6 turns within a round, which means that if you chose to do the 2 actions for your first 3 turns, you're going to be forced to build an invention for your final 3 turns. But when you're not building inventions, you can perform all sorts of different actions, and a lot of these do come with their own associated costs as well, but you can claim land with different influence cubes, build cities on the land you own, or even build trading posts on opponent cities. And what's really neat about interacting with the different areas out on the main board is that it can grant you with different resources, but it can also move you up these supply and demand tracks, which will grant you with different magnitudes of benefits depending on where those tokens are. There's also actions that allow you to move up research tracks to gain the benefit of the space that you choose to move to on that track. And you can also build wonders to gain more influence cubes into your supply, gain more culture out on the culture board, and also gain a special ability. Culture comes into play in a few different ways, but mainly it's going to be determining what type of government you can have for your nation, and there is an action you can take in order to change your government, and depending on the path that you take, it's going to determine which options you have to choose from. The cool thing about upgrading your government is that each one does come with its own type of resource generation or special ability, and there is actually a production action that allows you to gain certain types of resources based on the form of government that you currently have. But then there is our final action, which allows you to gain or upgrade your military units, which is both going to be determining your strength as well as any terrain advantages. This is really cool because at the end of your turn, you can optionally attack anyone that's adjacent to you. And anytime that you do that, you're going to be discarding any trading posts between you and the person you're attacking. But then you also do gain this Warmonger token if it was an unprovoked attack. And what I mean by that is that they did not attack you first. This token comes with certain restrictions that are going to affect you in other aspects of the game. And also when you have this token, anyone can attack you without gaining a Warmonger token themselves. Combat in this game is resolved using dice roll, and you're going to gain a certain amount of dice depending on your strength, but then you're also going to be gaining additional dice if you do have advantages in the terrain where the combat is taking place. Winning battles can of course gain you victory points, but can also sometimes allow you to remove opponents' influence or buildings and then replace them with your own. So this is a really nice way to try and get into certain territories that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. But the game continues like this over those 3 ages, with each age having 6 turns per player. Then the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game, and there will also be some endgame victory points granted depending on which players are further ahead in certain areas. Any resources that players still have at the end of the game can also be converted into victory points as well. If you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down in the description below, and of course you can click to get notified.